Hello, America. How you doing today? And hopefully, all our fellow veterans out there are safe and sound, especially the ones down in Florida due to the hurricane. Hope everything's going good and you're all safe and dry. And as you know, last week we introduced our co-host Kevin. And how you doing today, Kevin?
Great, everybody. How are you?
All right. And one thing we failed to mention last week is it's actually Suicide Awareness Month. So we want to touch base on that here just briefly. And in case some of you do not know, it is, well, the VA changed the Veteran Crisis Line and number. So we want to make sure that everybody's aware of the new number. You no longer have to dial a 1-800 number. It's just three numbers, and then you press one, and it'll hook you right up to the Veterans Crisis Line. And Kevin, I think this is a much better deal than the old number was.
Oh, for sure. You can just put those three
Mhm.
numbers in. You can text it or you can call it and then press one. And instead of trying to figure out what the 1-800 number is, 988 is, and hopefully it's going to be a really big, really good tool for the VA to help those who call in and need some help.
Yes, I agree with you. And speaking of that, it is also a big concern of Kevin and I about PTSD. Almost every veteran has PTSD. Do you agree, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, it's been brought out and more publicized a lot over the last 15, 20 plus years. But um, I think mental health in general, besides the PTSD part of aspect of it, is coming to fruition, and people are understanding it a lot more, and the resources that are available to those folks to get help. And it's not a crutch, and it's not something that is it's not bad to call for help. It's not bad to ask for help, and we need to get out of the stigma of being able to use resources and ask for help when we need it.
You just hit on a very good point. That stigma attached to mental health when it comes to service members. And I think that stigma uh, begins while you're still on active duty. It seems whenever somebody is sent to mental health, it's everybody else is saying, oh my God, they're in trouble. They're going to get discharged any day now. So you always try to stay away from mental health when you were in active duty. And I think that carries over to us when we re enter civilian lifestyle, that there's a stigma attached to mental health that it's bad. Now
Well,
I'm gonna admit I go to
you
counseling.
become guard.
Yeah, I go to counseling for
Oh
my
yeah.
PTSD.
Oh, me too.
And
Me
if I
too.
didn't, I know I'd be in a very much uh worse place than I am now. And
You know,
Kevin.
Teresa and I found
Mhm.
Teresa and I found a lot of resources and to reach out to for PTSD, and that stigma still keeps it keeps you guarded. Tim, it really keeps you guarded. It
Mhm.
really makes you wonder what's out there. Some people say it's a sign of weakness, and it's not. It actually, I think it's just the opposite. It's a sign of strength to get help and understand your strengths and your weaknesses. We talk about it all the time, understanding those strengths and weaknesses, and here we are again at the end of the month talking about this. So
Yep.
I'm excited for our guest to come on and talk with her and see what they've got to offer with our guest here. What do you say?
Yes, this is definitely a show that I hope all veterans and their families watch and take notes, because this is definitely going to help with that stigma. So I want to thank Kacie Taylor from coming on to the show today. She is part of a uh, nonprofit called Project Sanctuary. And welcome, Kacie.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. And for welcoming me. And I'm sure you guys can see behind me. We just moved into a brand new house last week. Just transitioned out of the military. My husband after 26 years in the Air Force. So this is raw. This is real life right behind me. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I think every service member can relate to unpacking and packing and moving and
Yes,
unpacking again. So,
for sure. For
well,
sure.
thank you to the show. And to start off this, can you explain what Project Sanctuary is?
Project Sanctuary is a nonprofit that was started 15 years ago by Heather Ely. She was an RN working in California that recognized there are a lot of different services and organizations that are available to veterans, but there's minimal organizations that provide services, wraparound services for the whole family. So Heather Ely's premise is that Project Sanctuary came into fruition because they believe that everyone has the right to heal with some type of military connectedness. So Project Sanctuary assists military service members, the whole family, by connecting them through a process, which is a holistic approach, by providing family support, by trying to get families to go to retreats, the therapeutic retreats, and then provide post-treatment, post-retreat treatment and or services and referrals. After we have families go to retreats, we also like to get them involved with organizations within their local area. So we continue to facilitate those needs post-retreat.
All right, and also, as I was reading up on Project Sanctuary,
Mhm.
it sounds as though you also include caregivers as part of the family too.
Correct.
Is
Yeah.
Mhm.
Correct. We believe that when one family member serves, the whole family serves. So we believe in the power of inclusivity. So we have retreats where the caregiver is a spouse or a potential battle buddy that comes to a retreat. So we are in the business of making sure we provide services and allow those resources and referrals to be made known to anyone that has a military connectedness, whether that is a caregiver and or a battle buddy.
You guys just had a birthday recently, I
We
hear, the
did.
organization.
We did this week, 15 years for sure.
Well, happy birthday to Project Sanctuary.
Yeah.
Yes.
How many people, veterans and families, have you guys served or helped or assisted with over the years of these 15 years?
So we have, we typically host between, I'm just going to say 25 and 32-ish retreats
Hmm.
each year. That's just the therapeutic retreat. So that's the couples and family retreats. So if I go back and look at the numbers, um, back in 2020, when we looked at the numbers of families we had served, we were at 1,700 families that we had supported. And that was in
Wow.
2020. And so the number just continues to rise as word about Project Sanctuary continues to disseminate into military installations, whether that's through VSOs, the Airman Family Readiness Center. So the number, we have people that reach out to us that are not looking for retreats, that are just looking for family support. And so we do include that number of families we serve. We do include that for family support requests as well.
Now, do you help veterans and military members, correct? And their families.
Correct. Yes. We do not discriminate. We welcome everyone from every branch, and also including reserve and guard. We include them for certain. And we also don't have an era stipulation. So if you have served pre 9/11 or post 9/11, we welcome any and all.
Now, what are the requirements for a service member to uh, get into one of these retreats?
So we don't necessarily have any prerequisites per se. We just ask that, when someone reaches out to us to attend a retreat, that they do have some familiarity with a military connectedness. So we have had members that serve only 1 year and have to look at medical discharge, or they've been faced with medical discharge, we welcome them just as well as we welcome those that have served 20 plus years, as long as they have some connectivity. We don't have the limitation if there is combat related injury. We don't specify any of those requirements. We want to be inclusive of any and all military members, veterans, active duty, and their families.
Right. Now, obviously, when the veterans and their families go on these retreats, there's some counseling or counselors that are available on these retreats. Now, are all these counselors certified?
Correct. Yes. So we try to have at least 2 counselors at each retreat. We have licensed professional counselors and or licensed clinical social workers that are on site. These individuals provide what we call psychoeducation while they're at retreat. So instead of handling a situation in a crisis, knowing that these retreats are only 5 to 6 days, our counselors provide psychoeducation to prepare them for treatment or care post-retreat. The counselors also work in tandem with the certified therapeutic recreational therapist or specialist to make sure that we provide a holistic approach post-retreat if they want to incorporate the therapeutic components, as well as the counseling components. They're beautifully coupled together. So we have the 2 counselors plus at least 2 CTRSs, which are those certified therapeutic rec specialists.
Now, is there any cost to the veterans and their families for these retreats?
Another great question. There is no cost for the retreat. The lodging, the meals, and the activities are all covered by Project Sanctuary and the stakeholders. The only out-of-pocket expense is the travel to and from the retreat center. Because we have so many families we serve, we try to have 15 families per retreat scheduled. And so it just becomes costly if we paid for everyone's travel to and from the retreat centers. But we often say if there is a limitation, if there's something preventing a family from attending based off the ability to pay for gas, then we encourage them to reach out to family support so we can potentially assist with a stipend to get them to the retreat center.
Now, where are your retreats located at?
So we are currently in Washington State in Warm Beach area. We are also in Texas, outside of Marble Falls at Banning Mills, not Banning Mills, that's in Georgia. We are in Belton, Texas, where we do a couples retreat. We are in Georgia, the Banning Mills, as well as Epworth by the Sea in Georgia. We are in North Carolina and in Maryland.
And you have Colorado too, right? Part of
Colorado.
Yep.
I was
Okay.
testing you, yes, and Colorado, in Granby.
Yeah.
Yes, in Granby,
So,
Colorado.
so how many, you said couples retreats and you said family retreats.
Mhm.
So what is, how many of those couples retreats do you offer versus the family retreats? And are those specific locations and specific times during the year, or is that, how does that work?
Yes, a great question. So we typically try to keep our Georgia Banning Mills, that is a couples retreat location. That is a popular destination based off where it is located in Georgia. We are looking at increasing the number of couples retreats that we're offering, especially in 2023, as we are planning that retreat schedule out now. We have noticed that there is a dramatic shift and increase in demand for couples retreats. I think maybe the age and the demographic has shifted a little bit, so we're looking at increasing that number. We also are looking at adding some additional locations for couples retreats in 2023. And we will also offer the couples retreat in Belton, Texas as well in 2023. But we are in the conception phase right now of building out the 2023 schedule.
maybe that's kind of a getaway for folks to travel a little bit and then come down and do some couples therapy retreat and kind of bond with one another. That might
For
be
certain. Yeah.
that might be why the increases come up a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we're on your website, and I'm brand new to this whole process, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing all these different things, and I'm seeing these opportunities of couples retreats or family retreats. And so what are some of the hurdles that you've encountered, or the problem areas with the familiarity of signing up? What does somebody expect who's brand new? I'm opening up the application form, or the form there, and somebody who doesn't know, because we all have the fear of the unknown. We're not sure what we're going to expect. So what would you tell somebody who logs into your, or gets on your website, looks at something and sounds, man, this couples retreat or this family retreat sounds really good, but I don't know about this, or I don't know about that, or I don't know how this works. So what would you tell somebody who's brand new looking at this, trying to ultimately get some help and come to one of these retreats?
So for starters, the best avenue is to go into projectsanctuary.us and get registered ultimately with our services through our webpage. That will allow you to select which area you are looking at getting help in, whether that is family support. The family support component, again, is where we connect with local and national statewide resources and referrals. So that would be family support. We provide services prior to retreat, during retreat, and then for 2 years post-retreat. So that is an option on our website. There's also the option for the therapeutic retreat sign up / application process. So they would need to register first and foremost with our projectsanctuary.us. And then from there, it will give you the option to elect whether or not you would like to get more information and or the application for the retreat, if that's a family and or couples. And so that will automatically generate an email to be sent to the individual or family asking for more information, and then reciprocating that by asking if there are questions that the military member and family have. It's actually a pretty seamless process when we look at the back half of the survey data that we get back. Is most people say that it's very easy and to navigate and to fill out the applications and request support and or a retreat application.
Now, these different locations that you have, do they have the same activities, or do they have different activities at different locations?
Good question. And I also would add in there that it also depends on the season. And again, like you said, the location. The activities are going to vary based off what's available at that retreat center. So, you might be doing snowshoeing or downhill skiing in Colorado in September, but you might be swimming in a lake in Texas in September.
Right.
You never really know for
Right.
sure. But the core curriculum that is the bread and butter of Project Sanctuary, that does not change no matter the location. Whether or not you're going to a couples and or a family retreat, we still have our post-traumatic growth. We have our reset workshop, which is just communication and relationship building. And then we have the money matters with First Command. That stays the same no matter which retreat and or location.
And I just want to let our audience know that the chat is open. So if you have any questions while you're listening to us, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll get your question over to Kacie. And now I was reading that you have the suicide rate for active duty at 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of agree with that, especially what's been going on lately as far as suicides go on active duty. Now, when a veteran, now, based on that, is it more of spouses and family members contacting you, or is it veterans themselves contacting you seeking help?
I would say it's a good mix of both. Typically, we see spouse, caregiver, partner reaching out to us initially to get information. Maybe they're seeking, some assistance and guidance to help with their service member or veteran. Um, we see a good number of veterans also reaching out as I've kind of exhausted my options and resources, and I found Project Sanctuary as a different approach. So I would say it's a good split between the veterans, active duty, and the caregivers.
And when a veteran does contact you,
Mhm.
do they normally say that they have severe PTSD or having bad thoughts? Do they initially let you know what's going on with them, or do you kind of have to draw it out of them?
I would say both. We often have those that are very transparent, more so on the application when we have them fill out the application, and we don't really ask for the details because that's a very intimate subject that we'd rather gain insight into when they're at a retreat versus them having to pin it to paper and then have to open up and talk about it again once they get to the retreat. But they might indicate that they have, had struggled with, maybe a TBI. Maybe they have dealt with some post-traumatic trauma. So they may simply talk about it on the application, but not go into depth until they come to a retreat. And that's okay. We don't go down that path of asking those deep, hard, heavy questions. And there are times they come to a retreat and they're still not ready. And that's okay. We just want to get to the tip of the iceberg and let them know that there are organizations that are here and readily available to help. That is a different approach to maybe getting some guidance and assistance for their post-traumatic stress and or if they have a traumatic brain injury.
So I got a question for you. I while filling out the application or the registering, and I'm seeing rock climbing, or I'm seeing swimming, or I'm seeing hiking, or any kind of those things.
Mhm.
Do you have specific things that you want the veteran to tell you as far as limitations go? Because if I'm
Mhm.
in a wheelchair, I obviously can't go rock climbing, or if I'm in a I'm a cane, I might be struggling to go for
Mhm.
a hike or go for a swim or whatever it may be. Um, do they fill that out and kind of let you know firsthand, or do they let you know when you get there, or how, or do they take in consideration the abilities or the physical impairments that people might have while
Mhm.
attending a retreat? How does that work?
Most often than not, the person that's filling out the application will let us know if there's limitations with modality. Um, and a lot of times our families are very resilient and they say, we're coming with our wheelchair, we're coming with our cane, we're going to make this a family adventure. We always um, start the retreat by saying that the activities are highly encouraged, but if there are modality limitations and or maybe they're just uncomfortable or unable to maybe participate in the zip lining or rock wall, we try to provide alternative options for the therapeutic piece. We also make phone calls 1 week prior to retreat to see if there's been any change in physical activity or limitation, because sometimes we have families that fill out an application in our family agreement for a retreat maybe a year prior. And as we get closer to the retreat, we will make contact with the family to see, has there been a change? Are there limitations that we need to be aware of? Do we need to have maybe an ADA compliant room? Do we need to have a ramp at the ready? So we make sure that we have um, talked to the families and made sure that they're comfortable, and also that we have alternative options for them if they're unable to participate.
Mm. Now, when a veteran does fill out the application, how long does it
Mhm.
usually take for them to get notified that they were accepted for one of the retreats?
I would say the process is pretty quick. We have families that do the registration on our website and then they elect the retreat application. If that retreat that they are selecting is not full, um, they will get a notification email potentially within 1 to 2 days. And sometimes it's even sooner than that. Some of the locations and the dates are in high demand, so there are times where there is a wait list, especially over those times of spring break when we have retreats,
Mhm.
because it's just conducive for families, as well as the summer months. And so we do have a running wait list that our programmers do a great job of maintaining that list and making sure that if we have families that are unable to come, that had eventually, or they had signed up for, but eventually they're not able to attend, we move the waitlisted families up on that list, and we make sure that we communicate all those steps to the families that are scheduled to attend the retreat, and for those that are on the wait list, we let them know ahead of time the timeline.
Now the lodging, it is that actually on the resort itself, or is it
Mhm.
like a hotel that's there? Or
It depends on the location. So I'll just talk about Snow Mountain Ranch, which is in Colorado. Typically speaking, the retreat center in Colorado is a YMCA facility, and each family is placed in their own cabin um, as a family unit. So it just depends on the size of the cabin based off the size of the family and how many kids they're bringing with them. Other retreat locations may be more of a hotel style room, just depending on what other organizations are also booked at that particular retreat center at the same time we are going. All the families will always have their own separate lodging facility and or room. We don't bunk families with other families for certain. That's a question we get asked quite a bit. So everyone has their own particular space.
So when you get the notification that you've been picked up for a retreat, whether it be a couples retreat or a family retreat,
Mhm.
do you have a point of contact for that retreat so they can start contacting them and kind of asking questions? Choose. I'm sure you provide maps or addresses. Now we all got GPSs on our phones. If they're coming
Right.
in from a long way out, is there like a point of contact that they get for that particular retreat that they have any questions can kind of go to them, or how does that work?
Yes. So as soon as that application is filled out and they have been chosen to attend, there's a letter that will automatically go to that family that asks those questions of, do you have travel, do you have travel plans? Are you looking at driving? Are you looking at flying? You'll receive a packing list several weeks prior to the retreat. You will also receive the retreat manager's phone number and their contact information. You'll receive a map. So we have all that laid out in a beautiful letter, as well as contact information for who the main point of contact would be if there are any questions. And there are the programmers and family support. We work in tandem to check in with the families and see if there are any additional questions that maybe are not asked on that email that goes out.
Now this is a constant evolving process for you guys and gals. So you complete a survey at the end of their retreat, and you kind of take those survey questions and see how for improvements, and kind of
Correct.
like answer those questions that what did you be at the beginning could have been different than
Mhm.
what could we have provided you.
Right.
So what exactly is your role in the project sanctuary portion of this? What is your job title, or what do you do within the organization?
So my job is the director of family support. So anytime a family and or couple individual reaches out to us, maybe they Googled and they were looking for military veteran organizations that assist with X, Y, and Z, because we kind of run the gamut in terms of what services we provide. Um, so they would, we have families reach out and ask where they can turn to for help for local utility assistance. And that is something that family support would be able to help with. We're also able to help with, answering the questions for the retreat. So we work with the families prior to retreat. We work with the families while they're at retreat. And then family support also continues to stay on board for 2 years post retreat. And I always tell people that does not mean at the magical 2 year mark, family support is no longer here and available. We just have seen great success that our families are stable after they have continued on with family support and received the services that we can provide for them, that they're able to kind of transition off of our program. Certainly, they're more than happy and more than welcome to come back to family support if they have a need that comes up that's unexpected. Um, Family support is really hard to put into a nutshell as to what we do, because every day it's a different request. It's a different need, and we try to honor those requests and needs by, I don't want to say prioritizing, but if we have a family that's dealing with some food insecurity, then that is a big concern. That's a big need that we will certainly try to eradicate that problem, by providing a solution and or providing some assistance to that family. And I work very closely with Heather Ely, our founder, just to make sure that we, family support and Heather, are working closely together to make sure that we're maximizing the reach we have with our families and our couples and individuals.
Now, during COVID, did you find that veterans and even active duty military were having a harder time dealing with their mental health issues due to COVID, or did COVID compound all their issues?
Mm. That's a hard question to answer. I think I would have no doubts it probably compounded maybe some already established stress for certain. But when we were dealing with COVID and everyone was restricted and, confinement to their home, that certainly allowed mental health providers to become quickly very savvy on how they can provide support to our families and veterans by doing telehealth services. So Project Sanctuary continues to work alongside several organizations that provide telehealth, because there is some comfort and security for some of our members to to receive counseling services for their mental health in their natural environment, which is their home, versus going to a clinic. So I think while, yes, certainly COVID did impact some, I feel like that's been very helpful to open up some avenues that were not already established prior, by allowing them to continue to have that level of care. We see a lot of veterans and families come to us because of turnover with therapists and counselors. And so we have seen success with the telehealth. There's some longevity there. So I think we'll see, and time will tell, unfortunately, the impact that COVID has made on our veterans and their families. But we were doing retreats. We were providing services and support during the pandemic, and we were continuing to meet the needs and communicate with our families very effectively, even though we were all in the confinement of our home.
Did you find it pretty difficult to start back up after COVID with your first in-person or first couple in-person retreats, or did it kind of just was a seamless operation, like it just never really stopped? It just kept going and going. How did that work out?
I would say definitely the latter. They have, because Project Sanctuary and the retreat centers themselves, everyone has, there are certain rules and parameters at the retreat centers, and Project Sanctuary makes sure that we adhere to those rules and also provide the latitude for our mill families and veterans, if they feel comfortable, coming back in person to a retreat wearing a mask and and having that social distancing, then we certainly, encourage that. Everyone has their own comfort level, but we transitioned back as an organization quite seamlessly, and just jumped right back in providing the support and retreats, kept that momentum going for certain.
Do you think there's a good balance between the active duty side or National Guard and Reserve and the veteran
Mhm.
population, or does it cover more of the veterans predominantly when you're having a retreat? How much support do you get from the active duty and Guard and Reserve folks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would certainly say that we weigh heavier. Our numbers are heavier for the veteran side and their caregivers. Um, it's harder for our active duty folks to be able to give themselves the grace to take off or have some time away and come to the retreat. We certainly have seen an increase in the last year of active duty Guard reserves come through, and we have had some where we've been more heavy on active duty and less on veterans. So I think, again, it goes back to the location. I can say for Texas in particular, because we are so base and post heavy in Texas, we do see a larger number of active duty, for some of our retreat centers, than veterans, and vice versa. Um, but we typically have at least one, if not two, active duty Guard or reserves at each of our retreats, and the rest of them, it comprises of the veterans and their families.
Now, when they sign up for a family
Hmm.
retreat, are
Hmm.
there activities for younger kids?
Hmm.
Because I know they're not going to be able to do a lot of like this snowshoeing in Colorado or anything like that.
Right.
So, are there for the much younger kids, are there special activities for them to
Mhm.
include the whole family?
For certain, yes. So typically, I'm just going to kind of start from day one of the retreat, and I'm not going to give everyone all the spoilers because we certainly don't want to give away all of our secrets as to how and what we do with our activities. But I will say, starting the retreats, which starts on a Friday with the orientation. Saturday is our first full day. And so we start our Saturday typically with a family activity. That first family activity is involving each and every family member. And the family is not necessarily defined as husband, spouse, and kiddos, right? So we don't have limitations on what that means to be a family at a family retreat. But that activity is for all ages. We typically have the classes, starting on Saturday as well. Those are 2-hour block classes / workshops. And the kiddos, youth, and teens are also in their 2-hour workshop classroom period at the same time. And the curriculum parallels each other. So at the end of the day, when the families go back to their rooms or cabins, they're able to debrief the day and share what should be similar topics and conversations that both have had. That program for the children starts, I mean, we've had babies come. So we have the staff that's there and the volunteers that are there to help with the child, youth, teen program. And then we typically have another activity during that first day. Again, that activity is going to be inclusive for all ages. Everything can be adapted. So, for instance, if we go on a hike, typically the younger ones do get carried by mom or dad, but it's not too extraneous that it's, a 15-mile hike. It's something that's manageable. Um, and then Sunday, we go back into class, same thing. We have the activity and then the 2-hour class. And then the activities are always for the whole family. That is not something that we segregate out and say it's only for certain families, and not the staff or volunteers. We actually all do these activities together. including our meals. We eat all of our meals together at the retreats. That includes staff and volunteers and the families. So we really, the only time that our families are without their kiddos are just those 2 hours that everyone is in class and workshops. Um, and then when we do activities such as zip lining or rock wall climbing, typically what we do is we just have the parents and or caregivers, guardians, just take turns. One watching the younger kiddo so the other one can go and participate in the zip lining and rock wall climbing. And we also have the staff and volunteers that are also able to help so that our families are able to go and enjoy those activities that they might not otherwise be able to do. So that's kind of the schematic of the retreat. Is every day there's at least 1 to 2 activities plus the classroom time.
All right. And at the end, how much interaction is there between the families? Because I
Mhm.
know, you go into the class, are all the family members all in the same class together, or is it divided up? So is there a lot of interaction between the families as well?
That's a great question. And yes, there is, of course, it starts out slow, right? During the first night of orientation, we all, are, I don't want to say scared of each other, but it's intimidating sometimes when you go into a new situation where we all know the reason why we're there. And that's for help and assistance and inclusivity and for connectedness. But that's hard. And we recognize that as staff. So first day is definitely the icebreaker and just welcoming of our families. But by the end, by Wednesday, there's typically not one set of dry eyes because the growth and the transition that happens over those 5 or 6 days, the families become quite vulnerable with one another, and there's a lot of intimate conversation that's had. There's a lot of sharing. There's a lot of camaraderie that occurs at these retreats. And so we have families that end up vacationing together with other families, or they're doing a road trip and they'll stop by someone that they met at a retreat just to say hi. They also create Facebook pages for their particular retreat so they can stay in contact with, and exchanging of phone numbers as well. So by the end, they feel like they have a new widely accepted family.
Yeah,
So you had mentioned volunteers. Do you take volunteers who haven't been in retreats, who have been in retreats? I mean, how do you select those volunteers to assist with some of these retreats?
Great question. Our volunteers go through, we have a volunteer kind of director that really looks at our retreats and determines where we have needs. We encourage our volunteers to have at least either gone to a retreat or seen a retreat just in its fruition so that they know exactly what they're getting into. Because it's easy for us to describe the retreat, but no two retreats are the same. So if they're able to experience one prior to volunteering, that just kind of opens up some larger conversations for what the needs might be. And then we have one individual that, like I said, that oversees the volunteer program, and she's a great resource and source of contact.
Now, you had mentioned camaraderie a little bit ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kevin and I, we advocated together for the PACT Act,
Mm-hmm.
and our situations were different, our backgrounds were different, our beliefs were different, but yet by advocating
Mm-hmm.
together, we formed a bond.
Mm-hmm.
And you had mentioned that
Mm-hmm.
also happens at your retreats, that these families form a bond. Now, do you now I would think that you would consider that an extremely helpful and healthy
Mm-hmm.
tool for veterans dealing with their PTSD, seeing that other families are going through, even though they're from different areas and backgrounds and everything, their situations are actually similar.
Mhm.
So do you think that is actually a good
Ab-
tool at these
Absolutely.
retreats?
Absolutely. And I would even throw in the volunteers, right? Many of them are combat vets and or have served in some capacity. And so their wealth of knowledge and information, added on to, to our attendees, it's a beautiful, harmonious relationship. It would be quite boring if we all came from the same background,
Mhm.
same service, same story. It would be like we're just being Xeroxed, right? But everyone has their own story to tell. And while we recognize that and we value that, we also want our members to come and not necessarily relive maybe their war stories, but really to look at the retreat as a fresh start and gathering with other families to enjoy that growth and resiliency that awaits them. And so I think when we really discover that when we're with the group and we see that everyone is there for the same purpose, um, deflector shields fall and the war stories stop, because then it becomes oh my goodness, I have faith and hope. I have some growth and resiliency. I've learned a lot from this retreat. And just because I was in the Army and airborne, I now have a new brother that was, a crew chief in the Air Force. And so each totally different occupations, but they both have their own stories, and they're woven together by coming to the retreat and learning that they too can have growth and resiliency and heal as a whole family.
And something tells me too that the relationship continues outside. Like you said, they create Facebook pages to stay in
Mm-hmm.
contact with each other. And
Mm-hmm.
something tells me families plan family
Mm-hmm.
vacations together to meet
Mm-hmm.
in like Disney World or something.
Right,
So
for sure. Yeah.
I tell you, or my wife and I was fortunate to go to Colorado. Unfortunately, the ranch burned down in the last couple of years ago in the wildfires, and we were able to go to that, and it was very helpful to go through the classes and um, that you're not alone, that the spouses are not alone when they're having these same identical issues or similarities with these issues, that you're sitting in front of 14 or 13 or 10 families that are, oh yeah, I remember that, or we, that happened, back then, or whatever, and the camaraderie that you build there. And also, now, do you share like networking stuff later on? I know that a big thing that when I was in the retreat, they were doing the weighted blankets. The weighted blankets, and they were giving out information about weighted blankets. And
Mm-hmm.
do you kind of share additional networking tools, and besides the classes, outside of that, to kind of go and check this out, or look at this, or this might be something that you might be interested in, or how does that all come together, and what do you guys do with that?
Yes. So during our post-traumatic growth class, which that class is led by the counselors, one of the things that we do that I think really ties in that PTG class really well is we pass a sheet of paper around, because everyone has either utilized or has been affected by a resource or a program that they have found to be effective and helpful. We then in family support compile that list and we put it within the Project Sanctuary graduate page for all to see and to utilize. We either put the hyperlink in for the web address or their phone number or an email address for a potential point of contact. And that is a good way for self-advocacy, as well as um, maybe they're not located in Anaheim, California, but they have a buddy that is. So they're able to share that resource. It's been, written down on that sheet of paper. And also they're able to look at that for, um, most often there are satellite offices throughout the United States, even though the one listed is in California or Georgia. That's been a great way to disseminate resources out to our families, is just by posting it on the graduate page.
And I find pages like that very helpful because, like you said, it might be that one organization might be in California, but if you
Mhm.
Google it,
Mhm.
and you might find a very similar organization in the state that you're located in
Correct.
that might not be on your page. So
Correct. Yeah.
I think those pages are very helpful.
Mhm.
And a few episodes ago, I had asked um, our viewers to email in the ways that they deal with their PTSD, and how they deal with their demons from their service. And when these veterans and their families, excuse me, arrive, and the veteran, I know for a fact, a lot of veterans have a very hard time just speaking
Mhm.
to a group to begin with.
Mhm.
Um, do you find that when when they start talking about their PTSD, do you see other veterans saying, "Oh, wait a minute,
Mhm.
the way I'm handling mine isn't working. That's why I'm here.
Mhm.
But he's doing something different. I wonder if that'll work for me." Does
Mhm.
that ever come up in conversations?
Mm, yes, it does. And that a lot of those conversations typically happen outside of the staff, right? Like
Mm,
we wonder as staff and volunteers, are we saying enough? Are we doing enough that's resonating with our attendees? And I'll be honest with you, some of the transformation happens by the conversations and communication that happens between our attendees and their families. Maybe they're talking about tips and tricks that they've used that have not been successful. But the family that's, bunking next to them in their cabin may offer some insight as to what has worked for them. And we hear back from those families and they say, Joe Tom told me about X, Y, and Z, and I tried it and I'm having great success. Um, so even though there are clinicians and there's, seasoned staff, sometimes the best information comes from those that have benefited greatly from a resource.
Kacie, we're getting ready to wrap up here. Can you give us some information before we close the show on
Mhm.
where to go for the organization, how to volunteer, how to
Mhm.
register, those kind of things before we dive off here. And again, we thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today because it's been huge. Just to hear these resources that a lot of vets have
mhm.
available to them that they don't know. So please feel free to tell us how we can get a hold of you guys and how we can help out maybe for donations and so on and so forth.
For certain. So the best way to, I would say, initially get in contact with us is to go to projectsanctuary.us. That is our main webpage. Thought I was going to have a dog bark. Um, um, is projectsanctuary.us is the main page. That will get information into the hands of individuals that are looking for the overall program of what we offer. Um, on our webpage, we also have the links for the volunteer point of contact. So you can easily just email her. Her name is Bonnie, Bonnie. And it's really easy to remember our email addresses because it's always our first name and then it's at projectsanctuary.us. So the volunteer coordinator, her name is Bonnie, Bonnie, and at projectsanctuary.us. And my email address for family support is just KAYCIE at projectsanctuary.us as well. And then we have our generic, I should say, email containers, which is the info@projectsanctuary.us, and that will also get to us as staff. So if there is a question, or maybe we have a family that just does not know where to turn with the question they might have, any of us are completely happy and welcoming of any questions, and we're happy to guide and or track down an answer if need be.
Now, as I was finding your contact information to
Mhm.
make this little slide for the show today, I
Mhm.
noticed that you also have a phone number for
Mhm.
Vets for Warriors, which sounds
Yes,
like it's a 24/7 peer support number. I
it
also
is.
have that posted as well. Can you explain what that is real quick?
So that is essentially an operation that provides that connectivity between peers. I don't think there's maybe a selection of which peer you get, but it is an option. Maybe a veteran needs to connect with someone, but maybe they want to kind of remain anonymous initially. They can turn to the 24/7 peer support Vet for Warriors number as well, and that is again operated each and every day.
All right. Now we're going to end up the show here. I want you to go ahead and stay on with us after the show ends.
Okay.
All right. And Kevin, you got anything to say to our viewers today?
Yeah. Again, Kacie, thank you for coming on. Project Sanctuary is near and dear to my heart. It helped my wife and I kind of come together and understand our little nuances that we have, and made us, I think, a better family dynamic and a better unit. So thank you for spending the afternoon with us and coming on with your time here for Project Sanctuary. So again, folks, if projectsanctuary.us, check them out. If you have any questions, we just talked to Kacie for an hour. She'll be glad to help out, as well as anybody else out there. And we can't thank you enough for coming on. And also join us next week on Friday at 1 o'clock for another episode. We're going to be interviewing Michaela Binsko from Veterans in Pain. So that'll be a real interesting conversation that we're going to have with them. And again, Kacie, thank you so much, and the organization, for all you do, your hard work, your efforts to care for the general commonality of human beings, and serving our nation, our veterans, and our active duty and guard and reserve components. And with that, Tim, I'll pass it on to you.
All right. First, to our viewers, I'm scrolling our email for the show underneath. So again, if you are dealing with PTSD and and your methods seem to be working for you, or even if they're not, email us what you're doing, and so we can do a show and bring some veterans on, discuss other ways of dealing with PTSD. Also, we are looking for some veterans from the Gulf War who were exposed to sarin gas. We want to hear your stories so we can help you further with our advocating. And Kacie, it
Thank
was
you.
an absolute honor to have you on our show today. Thank you so very much. I know a lot of our viewers will get a lot of helpful information and hopefully end up at some of your retreats.
That would be
So
wonderful.
once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And everyone, thank you for viewing today. And for those who are viewing but know some people want to watch this show but couldn't while it was live, we'll be on YouTube here in about an hour. Pandora, iHeart, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all within the next couple of hours. So thank you for tuning in today. Kacie, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on. And Kevin, my brother, I will talk with you later.
All righty, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you.